So probably for those that don't, how many people don't know what we're doing? Like, I just want to save you lengthy presentation. So just 2, 3, 4, right? Okay. So then we skip the lengthy presentation. All you need to know, we were named one of the top exciting startups in the tech space in Europe by Forbes. We are building a decentralized marketplace for tokenized alternative investments. Basically, for us, the whole rollout of the platform will happen in 2 stages. The first one is mostly around cryptocurrencies and utility tokens, and the second one will be focusing on security tokens. Why this is important? Probably I don't need to explain you. A lot of you have a background in financial services. This is how today the ownership in companies is transferred. And this is just companies, right? In most other physical assets, it's much, much worse, right? If you buy or sell real estate, it takes you not days, but weeks, right? And basically on the blockchain, it's just that, right? And this is why we're here. It's because this technology has arrived to reshape financial services as they exist today. And this is a huge opportunity because today in the crypto space, we're talking about billions, right? While we're all excited how great Bitcoin was growing and Ether and Ripple, we're still nowhere in comparison to real assets and what is traded in traditional financial markets. So imagine even a fraction of those assets being tokenized and moved on the blockchain. Oh, I see my UBS colleagues. Great. So just a little update. So where do we stand today? Of course, the most valuable asset is not crypto. It's people. And we are hiring very intensively. We are today 20 people. Last month, we had addition of 4 brilliant people who are all here. Alexandra, head of compliance and legal. Davide, who is our blockchain architect, PhD, unfortunately today not here, and several other people. We plan to grow the company to 35 to 40 people by the end of the year. So if you're interested in this opportunity, please talk to me later. On the technical side, we built the prototype of the Valor platform. It's publicly available under demo, SMART VALOR IO. I welcome you, all of you, have a look at it. There is a tokenization machine, there are smart contract-based auctions, there is all this great stuff. We would greatly appreciate any feedback, and there will be also community engagement program very soon, so you can also earn our currency. And basically here with me, my co-founders, Oliver and Thomas. Thomas is here. And they, if you're interested in live demo show, they, after this presentation, they can give you a live demo. Exactly. Another exciting news on our side is that we partnered with Ledger. Ledger is, in the crypto space, one of the, not one, the top address for hardware security. They've been probably one of the companies that has been around for the longest time. They received incredible funding of 70 million earlier this year, and we even have some representatives here who will, Thomas, who will talk a little bit more in depth about it. On the regulatory side, that probably doesn't look very much like me. Well, as you probably guys know, I've become famous here in Switzerland for being involved with Xapo, the largest Bitcoin custody and wallet provider, and making the first ever Bitcoin license possible here in Switzerland. And with that, kind of like, that gave me the courage to shoot for the stars and even think about tokenization of alternative assets, right? So I think Switzerland and Liechtenstein, that's definitely one of the best places to do that in terms of regulatory environment. So here we're almost done with financial intermediary license, went through Aufnahmeprüfung, what do you call it? Entry examination, and currently working on security dealer license and banking license. In terms of funding, we issue, and we will be going into public ICO later this year. Until now, so we're going to issue, of course, our own currencies that has a purpose of incentivization of all market participants on different sides. And of course, is meant to be limited in issuance size, and we will issue in this ICO 45 million out of 100 million. So where do we stand today? The current round was a small one, not public one. Nobody actually know about it. 3.3 million was 50% bonus. This round is actually almost closed. So last year we had a round of 1.5 million. This year we opened for 3.3. In April, raised already today 2.7 and had incredible 15 million subscriptions through the website. So actually we are closing this round next week. If somebody still want to get on this opportunity, so that's the time now. And maybe the last thing I would like to talk about is a little bit deep dive in one topic that is currently discussed in media and everywhere. You guys know, right? All the world is discussing stable coins, right? Because we kind of figured out that whenever you touch crypto securities, asset-backed securities, all this stuff, it's always a question, how do you settle? What's the other currency that, how you transfer the assets in and out, right? And we actually had the same question from the very beginning. We started to build this decentralized exchange for assets, being basically smart contract-based auctions for less liquid assets. And then we instantly realized that, okay, so the asset-backed token, you know, of this house or of this fund, that's clear what the value is. But to run the auction in a fully automated smart contract-based way, you need not just the asset in the form of a token, you also need money in the form of the token, right? And Bitcoin and Ether and all the currently available cryptocurrencies, being too volatile, are actually not perfect match for that, right? So we instantly said, okay, so of course Swiss franc, that's interesting opportunity. And we looked like what's going on today. Probably is one of the most famous cryptocurrencies, Ether. How many of you heard about Ether? Everybody? How many of you hold Ether? And Tether? Tether too? Well, that's US-backed coin, which was very, very much put into question this year because of possible manipulation. Because they actually said that it will be backed by US dollars, but at the end of the day, it was not. And if you look at the legal contracts, there is like clear statements that there is no obligation of this company to give you US dollars if you give them the Tether back, right? There were also a lot of suspicions that they actually just printed this Tether without being backed by US currency, by US dollar, right? But if you, and there are some other companies trying to solve this problem and come up with different solution, MakerDAO, and so on and so on. The key question is actually this. So if we assume that Bitcoin is, that US dollar is a good alternative for Bitcoin, it's true. But US dollar itself is not such a good option actually, right? Because this currency, being a reserve currency of this world, lost in the last 100 years almost 96% of its value, right? And because this currency is kind of still the reserve currency. It's been around for 150 years. But if you look at the history, the reserve currency is changing hands on average 100 years. So there were Dutch and British and French and US was the longest now for 150 years. But this is changing, right? If you look at the foreign currency reserves of developing countries, dollar lost half of its share within the last 20 years. And it's a clear sign that the whole world is in the search for the next alternative cryptocurrency, reserve currency. And cryptocurrency, yeah, that's Freudian. Freudische Versprechen, yeah. Exactly. So guys, the question is like, do you believe that the next reserve currency is going to be one of those national currencies? Chinese, like whatever. I don't think so. I think it will be the really fundamental shift to the cryptography-based currency, right? Which one? We don't know, right? Maybe somebody will come up with, you know, this genius new Satoshi reserve currency somehow. But for now, this problem is not solved. And I was always talking and writing a lot about that Swiss franc actually became this one of the most stable currencies. And actually, if Swiss National Bank will think about this huge opportunity that they could become the next national currency if they would think about tokenization of a Swiss franc, right? But I think, and it was like 2 years ago, nobody was talking, everybody thought I'm crazy. But last month, Swiss National Bank gave a new task to do the research report on how to tokenize the currency. And still, I think it will be too long to wait for us. And this is also interesting statistic. Look at this, guys. Like, this is the price of Swiss franc in comparison to USD dollar, right? So if you would hold 1 Swiss franc about 50 years ago, it would give you $4. And today it's just 1. So in comparison, in relation to Swiss franc, US dollar lost 400%, right? And now, you know, as all the crypto space is looking for the next stable coin, I think the answer is very clear. So that's why we actually started with a very simple idea, tokenization of assets. But what do we need as a settlement coin? To make transactions in all of those asset-backed coins easily usable, right? And it's with tokenized Swiss franc. And of course, the major thing here is also it needs to be stable, it needs to be 100% backed by the currency, and it needs to be easy to integrate. So it's going to be on the same standard that all the other ICOs are currently issuing their tokens for exchanges to easily integrate it and use it. And at current stage, I cannot reveal too much information because it's kind of like a really hot topic. You will hear in the press very soon much more. Maybe just one point here. Those companies that started to do this kind of tokenization, you know, like Bitfinex was the first company. They were the people behind Tether, right? They run in a lot of trouble and they're looking for the new jurisdiction where to move their business, right? And they said they're gonna come here to Switzerland. I think it's gonna be really, really long way because they come with a lot of baggage, right? And Switzerland, while being very open to crypto, that's not the place to settle your trouble. So with that, I think companies like us coming, you know, with very clean shit and being happy to go through all the regulatory scrutiny and compliance will be quite in a good place. And with that, maybe that's it from my side. Wow, 20 minutes. You did great, guys. Thank you. Thank you very much. I would take maybe just 5 minutes before we turn to the next speakers. Take 5 minutes for a very quick Q&A session, like 4 questions with 3-sentence answer from, you know, also to our team, Thomas, Oliver, Julian. Can see Julian. Julian, can you guys come to me, please, so that people also know that it's not one woman show. Okay, so we are basically 4 co-founders. So let's make it 3 questions. Any questions to that great team, please?
Where are you in the regulatory process?
So basically, we need those 3 licenses: financial intermediary, security dealer, OTF, organized trading facility, and finally, we believe that we need a banking license to be like really independent. And here we went through the first one, financial intermediary, and now we're working on the second two, being security dealer license and banking license.
And what's the timeline?
The timeline, so we're going to launch the exchange this October, November with just, financial intermediary license, and expect to get a security dealer license by the end of the year, beginning of the next year. Please?
I have a question on your business model of tokenization of expensive things. At the end, the transaction always involves someone using current endpoint devices to write something to the chain, to make a transaction, someone to read from the chain. But then these devices are completely broken by governments, and they're not broken by the NSA, but even by a 14-year-old guy from Ukraine. So how can you transfer buildings or code blocks? Because again, it's an end-to-end transaction. So even if your chain is completely perfectly secure, that doesn't matter because it's the weakest link. So I think the whole regulatory issue is connected with this very technical issue, which ultimately is the government's issue of certifications and stuff. So are you doing something in this problem?
Okay, let me take this one. You're exactly right. The blockchain, it's immutable and everything is on there that's pretty safe. But a weak link, this is the connection between the real asset and the token that's being generated. How do we make sure that there is no double spend in the real world or that this asset does not exist? And that being said, if you start about tokenizing real assets and securities, it's always a step back from a trustless system. You need entities that ensure trust, and that does entities that you custody, entities that do auditing, that verify that when you tokenize, let's say you tokenize the Swiss franc, you need an entity, you need one custodian for the underlying Swiss franc, and you also need an auditor that regularly verifies that the amount in the account is corresponding to the amount that's issued on the blockchain. So basically, it's a new breed of intermediaries, or maybe even some old intermediaries that
in a new shape
transition into this new world. And but it's going to be way fewer intermediaries than we see in today's capital markets.
Just to clarify, what I was referring to is the client endpoint devices, our computers and our smartphones being completely broken, and that's where the trust breaks. That's what I've been referring to. So
we're going to talk about security in a second.
We have a topic on this.
By the way, for those that don't know, this is Julian Bringer. Sorry, I didn't mention that. Olga Feldmeier and Thomas Felber. And Julian is our security expert, going to talk in the next line. Please.
I have another question. Where's the difference between issuing a voucher? If you have an event and you give out vouchers for Swiss francs, they have the same value, like 10 Swiss francs, I can get a drink for that. Where's the difference in issuing a voucher on the blockchain? Where does the regulatory say that's not working? Because it's basically the same procedure, right?
Yeah, well, in principle, yes. The tricky thing is, of course, in the detail, right? How do you create transparency for the regulator? How FINMA is going to see that, the same amount of token issued and in circulation is equal to the same amount of Swiss franc in the bank, plus if you want to go one step further, that you not just, take the reserves in fiat currency, but you take them also in Bitcoin or Ether, like MakerDAO, right? So that becomes, in technical sense, so complex to track, right? So that from regulatory perspective, you need like a new ways to enable the whole, view through all the blockchains and bank accounts and so on, right? So I'm not saying it's going to be easy thing to do, right? But we have great technical stuff, and they will definitely figure exactly.
We have a great team.
Yes. Any other question, please?
You say you will issue an ERC20 token, and we all know that, Ethereum, it's like a first love for me, is the single blockchain that really works now in terms of issuing tokens. But it still has some scalability issues, and we all know about it. Did you start investigating the other blockchain that promise scalability solutions, or are you analyzing other technologies? Because there are some out there that promise, okay,
Yeah.
they're not launched, but what is your approach on this direction? Because on ERC20 token, I'm sure it will be very difficult to run in the current state of Ethereum network.
Yes.
They're working, and they promise also to solve the issues, but there are also other technologies. Are you analyzing others?
So basically, we have an approach for the whole architecture of the platform to try to be blockchain tech agnostic, in the sense that we want to follow the state of the art, to be able to use. I mean, it's a fast-moving environment. So that's one part, and also we have a couple of connectors with different public blockchain, Bitcoin, Ethereum for the moment. We are investigating other blockchain, like Neo, for instance, like Cardano, and by investigating the connection with those public blockchain, and one of the goals is to be able to list some tokens coming from this public blockchain, or to be able to do swap between our tokens and those tokens. By investigating that, we are also following naturally what will become, let's say, more consistent with our own requirements in terms of performances, in terms of regulatory constraints, also to be able to evolve into our own platform. So we try to be agnostic.
Exactly. For now, I'd say all still too early, right? So, but maybe one last question, and then we move on with other somebody. Yeah.
So you said you're going to open your marketplace in October or somewhere there. Do you have already an amount or some ICOs ready to be promoted when you're launching, or how do you foresee this launch?
You know, the problem is actually the opposite. There are so many ICOs, and everybody.
So how
like,
do you select, or how do you filter?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think this year we're going to see probably like 3,000-4,000 ICOs, right? And if you look at it, Switzerland became this quality place. Like the best ICOs were conducted here last year, and it's still the same, right? So for us, it's a question of partnerships. So we are working with a lot of crypto hedge funds. And just to give you an idea, I mean, you know, if you look at, for example, Polychain, right? If they take this company into portfolio, that's pretty sure that it's an interesting project, right? And we are trying to not to be the centralized entity that is doing everything ourselves, but outsource and partner and basically build a network and community of, you know, engaging entities that together create a value creation. And the same is for community, right? Everybody who holds a Valor token will be able to vote on an upcoming listing, and if there is not the minimal vote by the community, it will not be listed, right? Just to give you a small example. So we are figuring out the way how to scale the platform and have a lot of offering without building a huge stuff.
Just let me also quickly add, at the first launch of the platform, the focus is on the secondary market trading. So for tokens that are already issued, we are ourselves the first token that will do an ICO on our platform. We made the proof of concept with my
product.
but we have at this time up and running the exchange as such for secondary market.